Hello ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another one of Mr. Lang's vlogs. Now today we're going to be starting with the Second Industrial Revolution, a huge time of change for the United States and the rest of the world. Now, here we go. We have an expansion of industry. After the Civil War in 1865, the U.S. was still largely agricultural. By 1920, the U.S. becomes a leading industrial power in the world, and this is due to three enormous growth factors. One, natural resources. We learn how to harness and get more of those. Two, we have governmental support, and we're going to go over that as well. And of course, three, urbanization. Now, Edwin Drake in 1859 finds black gold. Black gold, of course, is oil. He used a steam engine to drill for oil, and this breakthrough started an oil boom in the Midwest and later in Texas. Now, at first, the process was limited to transforming oil into kerosene and then just basically throwing out the gasoline, which is a byproduct when you make this whole process. But later the gasoline was used for cars because they realized that's for the combustible engine, that's what you needed to fuel it. You can see Edwin Drake there, picture with a bunch of barrels of oil. We also have a huge breakthrough when it comes to steel. Oil was not the only valuable natural resource. Coal and iron were plentiful in the U.S., and when you remove the carbon from iron, the result was a lighter, more flexible, and rust-resistant compound, steel. Now, steel had been around for thousands of years. The Japanese used it to make their katanas, but it was very, very hard to make steel from iron ore. But not anymore. Thanks to the Bessemer process. The Bessemer process did just that. And that was invented by Henry Bessemer and William Kelly. But we have new uses for steel. We're going to have Andrew Carnegie go ahead and steal that Bessemer process. And when he does, he steals it from England, brings it back to the US, and he makes a fortune. Literally one of the richest guys of all time. We'll go over into that as well. Now, new uses for steel, we have railroads with thousands of miles of track, huge customer for steels. We have a transcontinental railroad that goes on, as well as buildings. Skyscrapers come out of this, because now they can build buildings higher and more sturdy with steel. Now, spurs other industries, the railroad, because of course now you can not only, ship your product a lot further, but at the same time you can have more markets, and again, more opportunity because of it. Railroads were huge. Now we have a national network here, okay? We have the immigrants from China and Ireland, and a lot of out-of-work Civil War vets provide this difficult labor to make and lay down all of this track. And thousands actually lose their lives, again, laying down this track. But it leads to huge cities. Cities start to grow because you have Chicago, Minneapolis, Denver, Seattle. All these grow up thanks to the railroads that go right through them. And of course, we have our tycoons. We're going to get a little bit more to them, but our first one here is George Pullman. George Pullman builds a factory for manufacturing sleeper cars, they used to call them, very luxurious cars, and other railroad cars in Illinois. Now, he built a town for his employees, Pullman. Basically, it was modeled after an early industrial European town. And Pullman's workers felt that this was kind of strict because he had very strict hours, curfew hours, and very strict rules for his town. And eventually he lowered the wages, and when he did, the famous Pullman strike happens in 1894. Alrighty. Now, inventions come out of the Industrial Revolution, obviously. Some of the most famous ones. We have the light bulb. 1876, Thomas Alva Edison establishes the world's first research lab in New Jersey called Menlo Park. He's considered the wizard of Menlo Park. And he learns to harness electricity. And he perfected the incandescent light bulb with it in 1880. And later he invented an entire system for producing and distributing electricity called DC, direct current. By 1890, electricity powered numerous machines. We also have the typewriter by Christopher Sholes. This forever changed office work, and it opened up many new jobs for women as well. And we're going to have the telephone by Alexander Graham Bell, as a lot of people already know. Again, a huge invention because he, of course, with Thomas Watson, unveiled their invention in 1876. And of course, we have those corporations, those big guys. During America, we have capitalism. Capitalism is an economic system in which private business runs most industries and competition determines how much goods and workers are paid. Much like the US, but we don't have a pure capitalist system. But nevertheless, capitalism is what leads to these big corporation big guys. Again, as well as free enterprise. Free enterprise believe that the economy will prosper if businesses are left free from government and regulation and allowed to compete in a free market. This leads to something called social Darwinism, the survival of the fittest. Only the strong survives while the weak goes to the wayside. As you can see, there's Darwin in the corner. Now, this leads to corporations. A company that sells stock to investors to raise money is considered a corporation, and stockholders get a percentage of the profits. And Andrew Carnegie urged people to invest in stocks, because of course it helps make him richer. Because Andrew Carnegie was one of these first industrial moguls, these tycoons. He entered the steel industry in 1873 using the Bessemer process, and by 1899 the Carnegie Steel Company manufactured more steel than all the factories in Great Britain combined. And he had great business practices. He initiated new things like trying to make better products more cheaply, which he did. He also accounted systems to track expenses. He attracted quality people by offering them stock and benefits. And you can see him here. He offers vertical integration, where he attempted to control as much of the steel industry as possible. Vertical integration means he bought out all his suppliers, coal fields, iron mines, ore freighters, and rail lines in order to control the materials and transportation. And at the same time, we have horizontal integration. So we have vertical integration and horizontal integration. And additionally, Carnegie bought up all the competition through friendly and sometimes hostile takeovers, known as horizontal integration, buying up companies that produce similar products, in this case, steel. Big fish eating little fish. Now, business growth and consolidation is huge. Mergers could result in a monopoly. Monopoly, for what we'll say, can also be used as a trust. Monopoly, trust, interchangeable at this point for us. Monopoly is complete control over an industry. An example, think of like if Verizon, cell phone company, bought up AT&T, T-Mobile, and Sprint. If you wanted to get cell phone service, you'd have to go through Verizon. That's a monopoly, because they can also change their price to whatever they want, because they have a stranglehold on the entire industry. An example, 1870, Rockefeller Standard Oil Company owned 2% of the country's crude oil. By 1880, just 10 years, it controlled 90% of the U.S. crude oil. And we're going to get into how that affects people, including Ida Tarbell soon. Now, Cornelius Vanderbilt, he got his wealth by buying up all the railroads. He buys up tons of these little railroads and combines them between each other to make major cities, basically transportation, faster. And he made them more efficient as well. But they were nice guys too. These big barons, these greedy barons, of course, had a generous side. What they're going to do is they're going to believe in philanthropy. Philanthropy is when very rich people give away lots of money to charities and other things. Like Carnegie, he builds libraries. Rockefeller, Leland Stanford, Cornelius Vanderbilt, builds schools. All these different things come from these guys' wallets. But they hardly felt it because they were so rich. Now, we also put in the Sherman Antitrust Act in 1890. This made it illegal to form a monopoly. And prosecuting companies under the act was not easy, because businesses would simply reorganize into single companies to avoid prosecution. And 7 out of 8 cases brought to the Supreme Court were thrown out. It was almost useless at first. That's real trust right there, huh? Look at that little kitty and the dogs. All right. So workers had poor conditions as well. There was no such thing as OSHA back in the day. They worked 6 or 7 hours a week, 6 or 7 hours a day, 6 or 7 days a week, and had no vacations, no sick time, no leave, no compensation, no nothing for injuries. And injuries were common. By 1882, an average of 675 workers were killed per week on the job. And then we come in Mother Jones, Mary Harris Jones. She is the most feared woman in America because she was a labor activist that scared the big tycoons. And of course, labor unions emerged out of this. Conditions for laborers worsened. And so we offer the first large-scale national organization called the National Labor Union in 1866. Again, colored national labor unions soon followed after that. But these are your first unions. Again, unions focused on collective bargaining to improve conditions, wages, and hours. And this leads to some socialist unions. Socialism is an economic and political based system on government control of business and property and equal distribution of wealth among citizens. And the IWW, or the Wobblies used to be called, was one of the first socialist unions. And strikes tend to happen, and they turn violent. We have everything from the Great Strike of 1877 that turns violent, and so on. But one of the most famous ones that you need to know about is the Haymarket Affair. This was huge. This happened in Chicago. Labor unions continued to push for change, and on May 4th, 1886, we have 3,000 people gathered at the Chicago's Haymarket Square to protest police treatment of striking workers. And soon a bomb explodes near the police line, killing 7 cops and several workers. And so we have anarchists, or basically people who oppose all forms of government, were rounded up and executed for the crime. It was huge. We also have the Homestead strike, where Andrew Carnegie could not escape a worker strike either. Conditions and wages were not satisfactory in a steel plant, and so what ends up happening is they strike. And when they do, Pinkerton detectives were hired to guard the plant and allow scabs to work, scabs being very much temporary workers. Now we also have the Pullman strike. Pullman Company lays off thousands and thousands of employees and cuts wages. So what ends up happening? A strike at the spring of 1894. And Eugene Debs, American Railroad Union leader, tried to settle disputes, but they turned violent. Now Pullman hired scabs and fired the strikers, and federal troops were brought in, and Debs was actually jailed. It was very, very famous. And because of this, we have employers that fight unions. Employers often forbade union meetings and refused to recognize unions, and employers forced workers to sign yellow dog contracts. These yellow dog contracts basically said they swear they would never join a union. And of course, despite those efforts, the unions had over 2 million members by 1914. Now, that's a basic overall of the Second Industrial Revolution. Again, I hope to see you in my next vlogs. If you have any questions, feel free to email me. Alrighty, see you later.